To embrace change and develop, you need to be curious in order to push the boundaries. Sometimes change comes into our lives without us even realising, and in the automotive world, it's no different. Well, now, that change is in our driveways. Keyless entry and start replaced the ignition key. The arm over the passenger seat, that was replaced by the rear view camera. And charging your phone in the car, that's the new standard. Whether you're looking for a family car, a work vehicle, a luxury car, electrification is coming to all of them. In fact, electric cars, they're already here. The new world of cars is all around us. And what's it like to live with an electric vehicle, to be part of the next step? This is living with electric vehicles.
Welcome everyone. In this episode, we'll be looking into the real-world practicalities of living with an electric vehicle. And from what you've told us, a lot of you are interested, but want to see how others do it before jumping in yourselves.
Think about it a little bit like public speaking. You want to see how that first person goes before you dive into the deep end yourself. Over the next hour, we're going to talk to different electric vehicle owners to find out what they're like to live with day to day. But right now, let's get into the first part of living with an electric vehicle. We're going to jumpstart our conversation with a brand that's coming to the fully electric game effectively as a new challenger. This is the Volvo C40, the manufacturer's first dedicated electric vehicle. With a well-established brand like Volvo, there's a level of quality and performance you'd expect, and it's on show here in the C40. The tide is turning. More manufacturers are excited to get into the electric vehicle space and explore where it can take their brand, and most importantly, you. But how does the average punter feel about it? Let's ask Paul, the owner of a Volvo C40.
Really, the reason I wanted an EV is that it's time to move into the EV market. I've been conscious of climate change and working with our youth, and that's a major concern for them. I've got 5 children and 3 grandchildren. I'm really conscious that this is a major issue, and it's certainly been a major issue for, 20, 30 years, 40 years. We started talking about climate change.
You've had your EV for a little while now. What have you noticed that's different about your daily routine?
When I first got it, there was a bit of range anxiety, getting used to the idea of having to be aware of the charge and charging up. It's now just part of the norm. It gets down to 40%, whack it into the 7 kilowatt charger we've got at home. Haven't ever run out of charge. All the technology in the cars will let you know. You put in your destination and it estimates what your battery charge is going to be at the end of that trip and for the return. So you can see it very clearly. I didn't quite understand kilowatt hours until I really got it and was using the car. And it started off at like 23, but that was the car just sorting out its usage and the way I drive.
Yeah.
And it's down to 18.3
it's
now.
pretty good.
Which is
18's pretty good.
Bad
Yeah.
for 100 Ks.
Was safety high on the consideration set for you?
The Volvo became available. It has a reputation for that. So we felt safe buying it in both the sense of safety and the reputation that it had. Backed out of a driveway and a car's come behind and it slammed on the brake.
Yep. But what would you say to governments from your experience now as an owner?
Really trying to encourage the uptake of EVs, particularly getting cheaper EVs on the market and infrastructure up and down the highways, out into country areas, making it accessible, not tucked away somewhere where it's hard to find and you feel a bit isolated. Yep. There's a couple of places I've charged that I wouldn't want to be doing it at midnight.
For more information and everything you need to know about electric vehicles and the move to the future, go to drive.com.au. Now, one of the big questions in life for most of us is, what will the family car be? It should be spacious, comfortable, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't also be stylish and be able to keep the pace out on the road in traffic. The SUV segment is larger than ever, So let's take a look at this, the new Kia EV6, a medium SUV, but don't let its exterior size fool you. The GT variant is a fast Kia, and with plenty of features, it's a vehicle that you and the family can enjoy. Let's join James, who travelled down to Lorne in Victoria to meet up with Paul.
What is your main reason behind the purchase of the electric car?
Part of the reason behind it is we were trying to make our home more efficient back in Melbourne, and we put in solar panels, double glazing, did quite a few things, heat pumps for the hot water system, and electric vehicle was sort of part of that journey.
So were environmental concerns, were they a big part of your decision to purchase the EV?
Yeah, it was. I mean, clearly this car is more expensive than other cars you could buy that are probably comparable, petrol or diesel. But we thought it's worth spending the extra money to buy it. I got encouragement from my daughter who said, if you can afford it, you should really do it. We put 11 kilowatts of solar panels on at home, so we've got plenty of capacity there to run a house plus charge the car.
Has owning the EV changed your daily routines?
Not really, no. I mean, we never go to petrol stations, obviously, anymore. Charging it really, I guess we thought about it a little bit at the start, going, how many kilometres range do we have left? Maybe thought about it a bit. Now, we just plug it in every second or third day and, we don't even think about it.
Is the EV6, is this your only car?
This is our only car that we use. We do have a 10-year-old car that our daughter uses just to get to university and back. In Melbourne, where we've got the 11 kilowatts of solar, we put in a 32 amp circuit, 7.2 kilowatt charger. Typically, we never go below about 50%. So to top it up to 80%, it's 3 or 4 hours just to top it up. Here in Lorne, we couldn't put in a 32 amp circuit because our house here only has 40 amps. So we put in just a 15 amp circuit. It's a really portable charger, and that charges up overnight easily for the typical scenario where we drive from Melbourne to here and just want to top up. Something that we were quite keen on is the vehicle to load capability in the car. We looked around at how we could actually utilise that as like battery backup for the house, such that if there's a power outage, we can switch over and take power out of the car and power the house. You get reasonably frequent power outages in Lorne, power line issues with the trees. So we got down here, the power's out. We couldn't open the garage door, so I ran a lead from the car inside, opened up the garage door and then plugged it in and we had lights.
3 things that maybe bugbears or you wish were different with the electric car?
The thing that probably would just be on my mind is if I was going to do a long distance drive to Sydney or somewhere, I would be nervous. Because of the charging facilities available on the highways and so forth. That's something that really needs to be fixed by the government, encouraging more charges in those sort of tourist areas and highways, and that'll take away a lot of concerns that people have.
From the launch of the very first electric vehicle, there's been a lot of focus on speed, performance and power, but it's design where electric vehicles can most stand out from the internal combustion crowd. The inherent simplicity of an electric vehicle drivetrain, the fact that you can position the electric motors wherever you like, front or rear or both, and the fact that designers and engineers can move the battery pack down low in the chassis means that we can start to change the way that we look at vehicles. The first discipline that designers and engineers must tackle, though, is handling. Electric vehicles are inherently heavy, and as such, that doesn't always suit optimal handling conditions. However, we've already seen designers and engineering teams get clever with the way they're hiding the weight of electric vehicles. And in the case of some of the more expensive variants, you can drive them just as enthusiastically and fast around a racetrack as any petrol or diesel engine. Exterior designers and cabin designers have more flexibility with EVs than they've ever had with traditional vehicles. The front of an electric vehicle doesn't need to look like a traditional car because there's no radiator, there's no need for the same cooling. That carries through into the cabin relative to the seating position, where that is in regards to the front or rear of the vehicle. The engine bay doesn't even need to look like an engine bay, no transmission or driveline tunnel throughout the interior of the vehicle as well. That means we'll be able to access more storage, more cabin comfort, more space and more usability in EVs of the future. Sound is another factor for electric vehicles, or rather the lack of it. Without the associated engine, transmission and driveline noise, that amplifies wind and tyre noise that enters the cabin. And now aerodynamicists and designers can start to tailor the way the wind flows around the vehicle to keep the cabin as quiet as possible. Electric vehicles are fast, we know that. Engineers are able to deliver front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, or a combination. We've seen electric vehicles do a 0 to 100 km/h sprint in the 2-second range. That's seriously quick. In fact, it's supercar fast. However, the focus will shift to affordability. The average Australian is looking at a small hatchback or a small SUV that's front-wheel drive with a single engine at the front. That's the focus on affordability, and that's where electric vehicles will start to move. According to you, the two big barriers to electric vehicle purchases are the entry price and fast charging infrastructure. The cars are already there. It's time for the infrastructure to catch up. So, mate, what's involved with setting up a home charger? What are the costs?
Somewhere around about the $2,000 mark is an entry-level price for a supply and installation for a good quality, well-featured EV charger. Most common mistakes are taken care of in the initial consultation. My advice would be to discuss your specific requirements with a technician who is well-versed in both the product and the local electrical rules. Getting them sorted out prior to picking a charger is a big thing. There's various different features of the charger. You may want one that is integrated better with your solar generation. You may want one that will meter the power supplies for different users and give you a breakdown of that so you could split the costs up. You may need one that actually has a printable CSV form to give to the ATO or your accountant if you have a lease term. That the lease is then paying back the power that you're charging with. There's various different things to cover off, but cover them from the start. Buy one charger, the right charger from the start, and you can't go wrong.
There's a lot of talk about solar panels. Do they simplify, complicate, or absolutely no difference to the charger install?
From our point of view, it makes no difference at all. You may require some additional parts, all of which are purchasable through the manufacturer.
But if you live in an apartment, there's a whole bunch of other things you need to consider, isn't there?
The location of the charger. It would be best suited if you could get that charger as close to your car spot designated parking area as possible. Ideally, connect the power supply to your metered power supply through the main switchboard. If that's not possible, you'll have to go through to the strata committee or building management and start discussing the more pay-as-you-go options.
So if you live in the city, mate, off-street parking is obviously a concern. If you don't have a garage, you don't have a carport, you're then using public charging infrastructure.
Pretty much, yeah. The infrastructure is not there at the moment and the options aren't vast to implement anything that is usable at this stage, but that space is moving and the options are getting better.
For reviews, advice, news pieces, all the articles and everything that you need to know about electric cars, be sure to head to our electric vehicle hub at drive.com.au. BMW is a premium brand now with several electric offerings. Suze is in the iX3. Let's see what she thinks.
By now, I think we're all pretty well acquainted with BMW, the German brand known for its engineering and performance prowess and cutting-edge innovation in the design and technology space. However, in recent years, BMW has taken on another challenge: mass electrification. And heralding this age of emissions-free driving are cars like the one I'm sitting in right now, the BMW iX3, BMW's first ever electric SUV. Priced from $104,900 before on-road costs, the iX3 landed locally in 2021 as part of an onslaught of premium electric SUVs like the Mercedes-Benz EQC and the Audi e-tron. It's also just one member of BMW's ever-expanding all-electric family, which includes cars like the iX1 small SUV, iX large SUV, and i7 limousine. The rear-wheel drive iX3 is capable of outputting 210 kilowatts of power and 400 newton meters of torque, and it can drive up to 460 kilometers on a single charge. It's also got a few neat party tricks inside, so you can manage the infotainment system using hand gestures alone, plus it can park itself, which is super handy. It does all of this without sacrificing on the ultimate driving machine DNA we've come to know and love from BMW, with sharp handling and smooth yet silent acceleration. As evidenced by the iX3, BMW is doing some pretty exciting stuff in the design and technology space, but the wider industry also has plenty to offer and improve on. One of the most exciting things about electric cars is that they're technically always on, which means they're primed for automation and remote access. This gives manufacturers the ability to completely rethink the mechanical nature of the car even after you've bought it. With the push of a button, you can upgrade things like the acceleration feel, the energy management systems, even how the car sounds, without having to set foot in a service centre. On the flip side, electric cars are also able to feed data back to their owner's mobile phones. So the Hyundai Ioniq 6, for example, can provide its owner with a live video feed of its surrounds direct to their mobile phone via its remote surround view camera. Already, plenty of EVs and cars in general can carry out basic manoeuvres without requiring a driver behind the wheel. For example, the Kia EV6 can park itself without needing you in the car. While electric car charging technology is advancing rapidly, there's still the issue of those cumbersome charging cables, packed charging stations, and of course the downtime it takes to top your car's battery up. While you can be in and out of a service station in under 5 minutes with a petrol car, even the fastest charging electric cars still require about 15 minutes to top up. Something that has the potential to change all of this is wireless charging. Picture this, a highway kitted out with wireless charging pads as far as the eye can see, allowing you to top up your car's battery while you drive. Already in Oslo, Norway, there's a fleet of taxis that can be recharged using wireless charging at a taxi rank while they wait to pick up passengers. We know these cars need to make sounds, but what should they sound like? Car makers are getting pretty creative in this space. For instance, the BMW iX3 features BMW's iconic Sounds electric system, which was hand-designed by legendary composer Hans Zimmer, and of course, let's not forget Tesla, which temporarily allowed its owners to change the sound of their car horns to a fart noise before this prompted a recall over public safety concerns.
The Kia EV6 is the brand's first ground-up electric vehicle. Trent has done many laps in this thing before, on a racetrack and around many towns. But let's see what he thinks about driving it around Sydney.
Starting from just over $72,000, the Kia EV6 range is so popular with Australian buyers that getting your hands on one is going to be the only problem. There's a 2 model specification range in both all-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive, and the highlight for us is the space and practicality afforded by what Kia calls a large SUV. There's room for 4 adults, and the rear-wheel drive Air has got a range of over 500 kilometres. The Kia EV6 is comfortable too on the typical types of Australian roads that we spend so much time on, no matter how choppy the road surface. And if you've got a hankering for performance and the budget to match, the range-topping GT, it gets from 0 to 100 in just 3.5 seconds. Don't forget, for more information on any of the vehicles that we've spoken about on this show, you go to drive.com.au.
Well, it does seem a little bit funny to be talking about the innovation of electric vehicles when, by rights, they represent the single biggest innovation that we've seen in automotive powertrains since horses. So to kick things off, let's start with the most important part of any new energy vehicle, the energy source, or the battery. Current battery technology uses lithium-ion chemistry, which won't change in market for a little while. So the engineers are focusing on battery design and construction. For example, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 here has a 77.4 kilowatt-hour battery and a claimed 507 kilometre range. Now, for context, that is already a 5% uplift on where the car was when it launched just 18 months ago. So imagine what could happen over the next 5 to 10 years. But that's not the half of it. Hyundai are already working on the 3rd generation battery technology for the Ioniq 5 and other family cars. What that means is that when the next one of these comes out, it will have up to 1,000 kilometres range, which is a 90% improvement on where we are today. The other key area in terms of energy is considering the car as a mobile part of the entire electricity grid. So the technology known as V2X, which is vehicle to something, means that the car can use its power to power something else. We've already seen V2L, which is vehicle to load, where you can plug in household appliances and other devices and use the car's battery. Now, the next step is V2H, vehicle to home, which means when you park the car at home of a night and plug it in, you can use the car's power to run, well, the entire house rather than just the coffee machine. Now, the final and perhaps ultimate step to all of this is V2G, which means vehicle to grid. That means Australia's growing fleet of electric cars can all put in and draw from the national electricity grid as needed. It does make our energy supply far more fluid. However, we're still a bit of a way from there. The infrastructure obviously needs to be updated, as does the bureaucracy. Just be patient. As Rachel Hunter and Pantene famously said, it won't happen overnight, but it will happen. It's this current approach to innovation that will lead us to smarter, lighter and ultimately more affordable electric cars in the very near future. Because after all, isn't intelligent and efficient energy use what all of this was about to begin with?
You've seen the new Hyundai Ioniq 6 in this show. It's all about style, but I can tell you there's plenty of substance there as well. In the meantime, James has been spending some time in the Hyundai Ioniq 5.
And do you want to sound like an automotive engineer? Well, here is some knowledge about the Hyundai Ioniq 5 that is sure to impress your friends. This car rides on what is known as the EGMP platform. That is the Electric Global Mobility Platform. And it's the same underneath bits that are used by the Kia EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 6 and the Genesis GV60. And what that means that if you're spending about $70,000 on the entry-level Ioniq 5, you get all the benefit of that technology and development of cars that cost well over $100,000. That means things like high-speed charging, the vehicle-to-load capability, and the ongoing development is shared across all of those models, which is a really, really smart way to do it. The other key benefit of the Ioniq 5 is that using that platform, it makes this car a ground-up electric car. And you may hear that term sort of bandied around, but what that means is that the engineers started with a clean sheet of paper. They didn't have to make compromises based on petrol drivelines and other models in the range that aren't electric, which means you get a tremendously spacious interior here. There's a flat floor, there's heaps of legroom in the back. This center console can slide back and forth. You can even recline the front seats in some models to what Hyundai call a lounge room mode, but it shows that we can have a really clever car that is also a really, really cool car.
Volvo's made the jump to electrification before any other major manufacturer in Australia. For then, it's going to happen in 2026. We've seen Emma driving the Volvo C40 around the beaches of Gippsland. Em, what do you think of it on the streets of Sydney?
This is the Volvo C40 and it's the first Volvo model offered solely with electric power. It's also the first Volvo to be completely leather-free. The one that I'm in is the entry-level single motor and packs a 67 kilowatt-hour battery. It's good for 170 kilowatts, 330 newton meters, and has a 0 to 100 kilometre sprint time of 7.4 seconds. But what you're probably most interested in is how far you'll be able to drive in it. Well, this has a claimed driving range of 434 kilometres. If you're wanting a bit more power, a little bit more kit, and of course it'll cost you a bit more coin, then there is the flagship dual motor. But this has more than enough in the way of standard features. You get things like your wireless charge pad, front and rear heated seats, a power tailgate, and a panoramic glass roof, all standard, and all just make that drive a little bit more pleasant. I already mentioned this is the first step for Volvo into the electric future. It's actually the first of 4 models that will arrive into the Australian market by the end of 2024. Electric models, that is. In case you didn't know, Volvo has committed to axing its petrol-powered vehicles in Australia by 2026. It's quite an ambitious deadline, and that's because it's 4 years ahead of its global deadline. Beside me is the Kia EV6 and the Volvo C40. Both good-looking, well-featured electric cars with decent driving ranges that sit at the premium end of the spectrum when it comes to pricing. But what about cheap electric cars? The GWM Aura and MG ZS EVs start at just under $45,000 drive away for most states, with the BYD Atto 3 not too far behind, and more to come in Australia this year, including the MG4 and the BYD Dolphin. In a nutshell, that electric car with a 500-kilometre range and a $30,000 price tag doesn't exist right now. We're in a bit of a waiting game, but it will certainly turn the tide for a lot of Australian buyers. Think of it like a smart TV. When they first arrived on the market, they had eye-watering price tags, but that's all changed now. Like with any technology that advances, a new model is going to be expensive when it first hits the market. The thing is, if you want a premium product, you need to pay a premium price tag. Servicing costs are cheaper for an electric vehicle. They are less expensive to run, and if you don't have the capacity for a home setup, this means you'll be relying on public infrastructure, which isn't up to scratch right now. And we've also got to acknowledge that electricity prices are rising faster than fuel. Yes, you can charge it solely on a solar system, but it will cost you around $50,000 to set that up. And a solar system just isn't a viable option for a lot of Australians. Basically, if you are on the hunt for an electric car right now, be sure to do your homework, consider all realms, and figure out what best suits your lifestyle. For reviews, advice, news pieces, all the articles and everything that you need to know about electric cars, be sure to head to our electric vehicle hub at drive.com.au.
Sustainability is a big part of the narrative around electric vehicles, but when you think of the term sustainability, you might not necessarily think of a mining company like BHP. In fact, BHP has put in plenty of groundwork to make sure its operations are as sustainable as possible, and they're not stopping. To find out more, I'm here at BHP's Melbourne headquarters to speak with Dr. Fiona Wild, BHP's Group Climate and Sustainability Officer. So Fiona, I'll address the obvious first. I think when people think sustainability, they don't necessarily think BHP. Do you feel as though you're coming from a long way back on this sustainability journey?
I don't think we are, to be honest. We've been setting targets and delivering against those targets to reduce emissions, to reduce water consumption, to engage well with communities for such a long time. So there's been a really, really long history of commitment and delivery at BHP. There's absolutely no doubt that the work that we do as miners does have an impact on the environment. And so it's really important that we're aware of that. It's really important that we set targets to reduce those emissions and impacts as much as we possibly can, and that we transparently report on our progress and our delivery. And we're held accountable through that, for example, through things like executive remuneration.
What role do electric vehicles play in the company's future?
So an electric vehicle has something like 4 times as much copper in it as a conventional car. When you look at electric vehicle batteries, they have 40 kilos of nickel in them. And so the commodities that we produce are incredibly important to the rollout of electric vehicles. And that's why you're seeing BHP moving away from some of the commodities we used to have, so oil and gas, for example, and really pushing towards copper and nickel and other commodities like that that are absolutely essential for the future.
You have a PhD in chemistry and decades of experience in resource management. I'm curious to know what resource or which issue do you think is going to be most pivotal in the coming decade?
I think probably the most important thing is to help people understand the role of commodities in decarbonisation. I think when I ask people what are electric vehicles made of and what do you need in a battery to make it run, they don't necessarily realise that it's copper and nickel. And so helping people understand the role of these commodities, how we're going to need more of these commodities, and they actually facilitate decarbonisation rather than slowing it down, that to me is the biggest thing that we can do. We've done a lot of work to think about how the demand for copper and nickel might change over time, particularly if the world rapidly decarbonises. And what we see is in a world which rapidly decarbonises, you might expect demand for nickel to increase 4-fold in the next 30 years in comparison with the last 30, and for demand for copper to double. And so what that means is we're going to have to continue to look to produce copper more sustainably from the operations we already have, but also to look for new opportunities in copper. And we're going to have to try and do more effective recycling of batteries to make sure we're pulling that metal back out again and reusing it where we can. And I think with those 3, we're in a really, really good position to meet the demand that we expect to see for copper and nickel worldwide.
Batteries and range anxiety are two of the biggest hurdles for people wanting to get into the electric vehicle market. But as we've discussed, if you break down how you actually drive, it's not an issue for most owners. So let's talk to Hyundai owner PK and see how his experience has been.
PK, firstly, tell us what made you want to buy an electric car?
So I decided to purchase an electric vehicle because some environmental factors. It was a new shiny toy. I'd been doing a bit of research about cars. I'd been looking at getting a hybrid, and then I came across the Hyundai.
What made you choose the Ioniq 5 over other cars that you were cross-shopping?
Yeah, I like the fact that it was designed from the ground up to be an EV. It wasn't a petrol car with a transmission tunnel with a battery pack tacked onto it. So that helped with the decision in terms of its design. The reviews all said that it was much larger inside than it looked like. So there were all those little factors.
Have you travelled long distances with your car?
Yeah, so we did a trip from Melbourne to Penola and Coonawarra earlier this year. So we topped up at a fast charger just outside Ballarat.
Have you come across any hairy moments when out on a road trip?
Heading back for the fast charger outside Ballarat, the highway was closed and we had to detour, and I had two choices and I think I ended up choosing the longer choice, and we got down to 0 charge on the car. So that was a bit of range anxiety kicked in there. The detour was probably about added an extra 15 kilometres or so. And so we ended up sort of bush bashing, going up dirt roads and things to try and get to this fast charger. But like an ICE car, when it says 0, there's still something left in the tank. And so luckily we were able to get to the fast charger, and from 0 up to about 80% took 20 minutes. So that's one of the differences than using a petrol-driven car. You need to think ahead as to where you're going to charge, what sort of charger it's going to be, whether you need to bring your own cable. Some places have come with cables and other places don't, but you do have to plan ahead.
What do you think the future looks like for electric vehicles in Australia?
That's the way that it's going to go, definitely. We need more charging infrastructure and we need more of it out in the regional areas, but otherwise it's definitely the way to go. And I can see that over time batteries are going to get better, the range is going to increase, and it's going to be very commonplace.
For more information and everything you need to know about electric vehicles and the move to the future, go to drive.com.au.
So here we are, we're midway through 2023. Where are we at the end of this year? Where are we in 2024?
Absolutely. So if I speak about our goal, I come back to first principles, and that's our mission, which is to be the leading fast, reliable and convenient charging provider across Australia. So how do we do that? We want to roll out a network really quickly, but that network has to be reliable. So we're aiming for 98% uptime, and it has to be fast.
The idea of utilising existing service station infrastructure, does this just make sense?
Yes, we think service stations are terrific locations for fast chargers. And I guess if you look over the last, 100 years, there's been a process of natural selection to ensure that service stations are located where drivers need them. We're not constrained to BP service stations. There's lots of land out there that we can put up chargers on as well.
So pop-up BP electric charging, essentially?
Yeah, so across the world we're seeing dedicated charging hubs, which is really, really exciting. BP Pulse's largest charging hub in the UK has just been launched with 20 charging bays in Kettering. So that's a great establishment that you can guarantee as a driver there's going to be some charging bays available. Really good for fleets, taxi and rideshare drivers as well. In China, we've just started operating what we think is the world's largest charging hub. It has 386 charging bays.
Wow.
So this is significant scale. Obviously in Australia, we're still a little way off, but we're casting our eyes across what our colleagues are doing overseas and hoping we can bring a lot of that know-how and scale here to ensure that we provide the drivers in Australia with the charging requirements they need.
Now, another thing that we see from chargers, particularly the remote ones, is there's many documented cases where someone will park either a non-electric vehicle in front of the charger or will plug their electric vehicle in and wander off and disappear for hours on end.
So with regards to electric vehicle drivers who stay beyond when their vehicle needs to be charged, one way that we're seeing in the industry respond to this, and it seems to be quite well supported, is the introduction of idle fees. One of the benefits we have here is that we have staff on site. So all of our stations at the moment are staffed, and we have customer service people who can respond to such situations. We do see that they're very unusual for this to happen, particularly at our sites. And one of those reasons is because all of our sites are clearly marked.
Taking the BP hat off for a second and looking as an EV driver and as an Australian, where do you feel we really need the most amount of effort here? You know, for a private enterprise like BP to be going out and doing this is obviously great, but it's not the whole solution.
It's good timing because the federal government has obviously just released the National Electric Vehicle Strategy, and that is really a roadmap now for the industry to go ahead and get the work done. We're in a position where we have investment confirmed. Our strategy is clear and we're going out there and getting the work done. And we're seeing lots in the industry do the same.
The BP Pulse network now, they're greater than 50. They're 75 kilowatt chargers. Do they have an upgrade potential? So as cars need either more batteries or the technology changes and cars can charge faster, can you upgrade your network to suit?
Yes, we can. So the chargers installed on this site and all of our sites across Australia are capable of being upgraded to 150 kilowatts. That's a really important statistic that potential drivers should know. And in the future, we have plans to install up to 300 kilowatts of charging. So that's 300 kilometres of range in 10 minutes. So we think fast and ultra-fast charging is where the investment should be placed, and that's our focus.
To better understand just how little the iX3 differs from its petrol or diesel counterpart, the X3, I actually have an X3 owner here with me today, and conveniently, it's none other than James Ward. James, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Suze. And look, there's my car there. It is a black X3. Different wheels, but otherwise basically the same car.
And you bought your X3 as a family car. Tell me, do you think this is still capable of the school run?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And everything that you need from a practicality sense is exactly the same. The boot feels the same, the back seats, the same amount of room, the front seats, the tech, everything. It even smells the same, which I think is a weird kind of thing to say. But it means that transition is effortless. If you know your car now and you're thinking about electric, you don't need to relearn anything. We get asked a lot of questions about people not sure if they know, do I need to do things differently? Do I need to relearn how to drive? A car like the iX3 means that if you have got an X3 and you want to make that move, you'll be driving out feeling right at home within an hour. So easy.
Thank you, everyone, for coming together at the end of another busy week of testing a lot of great electric vehicles. Let's kick it off with talking about when we caught up last year compared to this time now. In Australia, as it stands, things are certainly involved in terms of more affordable offerings hitting the market, infrastructure rollouts, but we're not there yet. That's obvious. What are some of those big barriers? Is price, you think, the biggest barrier for customers these days?
I'm going to go with no. 50% of all electric vehicles that are purchased in Australia are Teslas. They are $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 cars. They are not the cheapest ones around. So if we'd seen a huge growth at that affordable end, fair enough. But people are buying the cars they want rather than the cheapest cars. And we will see cheaper cars in due course. But I think at the moment, we're Australians. We buy what we want that suits us. That's the key.
I think to that point, the people who are buying electric vehicles are buying the expensive ones, as Wardy said. We do know, though, if we look at the sales data and take out all the commercial vehicles and fleet vehicles, the average Aussie is spending mid-30s, give or take.
It's higher
on
than
a
that
new
now.
car. Yeah, it's climbed up, hasn't it, a little
yeah.
bit, right? But we keep saying, and we have said, that if we move towards a future where the government's mandating that you must buy an electric car, they need to be cheaper than they are now, because with 1 million, give or take, new car sales every year in Australia, a whole chunk of them are going to need to be well under where they're priced at the moment.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to disagree with you strongly. I think price is the #1 barrier, because I think cost of living is a huge issue at the moment, but also for younger generations. And I think the uptake there is going to be exponential. They care about the planet, they're interested, they like technology, and I think electric cars are exciting to them. And if we can't get models at least under the $40,000 mark, if not under the $30,000 mark, they're not going to be able to afford to buy them.
I think I already know the answers for all of you, but
Well,
I
then
think
don't ask the question.
everyone at home would be really keen to know, would you go out tomorrow and buy an electric car? If so, what would it be, Suze?
Hell yes.
See, I knew that.
That's a yes for Suze.
My big barrier is that I can't afford the one I want. And
Polestar?
also, my dream electric car is probably 3 years off. That's the Volvo EX90. I would have that in an instant. My other major barrier is that I have a tiny house with no off-street parking, but I'm willing to work around that for the right car. So yes, absolutely yes.
One yes,
Yeah,
James?
see, I'm willing to work around the no off-street parking. If you put your plan to it, it works. For me, it would need to be the second car. We still need the flexibility of a car that can kind of go anywhere just with our situation. But look, I really enjoy it. There's something about it. I really quite enjoy the silence. I find it really relaxing. I'm there.
Yeah, it
Trent?
is. Well, you go first, Em. I'm interested.
Okay, I feel like it's going to be 50-50 here because I think that we're both going to say no. It doesn't work for my lifestyle. That's the main thing. I travel long distances, but also in my new building, and shout out to all the new buildings out there, I have absolutely no access to a plug, and you already know this. I love the sound of an engine.
You
You're
do.
right.
Look, I love electric cars. I love getting in and driving them, but I love driving a Porsche 911 and Lamborghini Aventador as well. I'm not buying them. Em, as you know, I drove one of my cars from Adelaide to Sydney because I wanted to. You know what I didn't want to do? Wait 2 hours in 2 different spots to have to charge the thing. Then when I got to the country motels, they had no plugs near the room. So yeah, for me, you know, if I'm talking about having a car, I tow with it. I do a lot of long distance driving like you do, a lot of interstate stuff. So if I've only got to have one car, yeah, not yet.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. Choice, right? Choice.
Well, we hope over the last hour you've learned a little bit more about what it's like to live with an electric vehicle. For plenty of you, you're probably pretty excited by that prospect, but for some of you, you're just not ready to make the jump just yet.
I think you can all agree, though, that the move is upon us. But what the future looks like, well, we'll just have to wait and see.
That's right, and don't forget that for all the information on this episode, the cars that we've driven, and for the full interviews with our electric vehicle owners, all of that and more, it's at drive.com.au.
The future of a world full of low emissions transport is being built right now. Every day, the world is moving towards cleaner, more sustainable, electric-powered transport. It's not easy, but it's resources like the copper and nickel produced by BHP that help make it possible. The future is clear. It's happening now at BHP, Australia's global resources company.